Hello and welcome to Reading Redhawks. My name is Stephanie Jamison and I am the Assistant Director for Mission, Spirituality, and Vocation here in the Office of Alumni Engagement at Seattle University. This session features Professor Jasmine Mahmoud and alumna Ellen McGivern, class of 2019. Dr. Mahmoud has been teaching at Seattle University since 2018 and is an urban ethnographer and performance historian who engages contemporary artistic practices, race, policy, and geography. Ellen graduated from the Arts Leadership Program in 2019 and is currently a curatorial assistant for this exhibition as well as a coordinator for Shun Pike's Storefronts program. A former arts marketer and communications professional, Ellen's curatorial interests lie with the intersections of performance, craft, artist rituals, and invisible labor. In addition to COVID-19, Jasmine will also talk about systemic oppression and anti-Blackness and how that informs the art and the artists' journeys, the Black Lives Matter movement, and how this is all connected in the artist and curator experience. And now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Professor Mahmoud.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm really excited to be with you all here today. I hope you all are doing well. We want to begin by just giving you a little bit of background on the exhibition. So the exhibition that I curated with an amazing team of people is called Abstractions of Black Citizenship, African-American Art from St. Louis. And maybe, Ellen, can I ask you to put the URL link in the chat? Is that okay? Great, thank you so much, Ellen. So I'm gonna just give you a little bit of background and then we want to turn over an initial question to you. So I lived in St. Louis from 2016 to 2018. I had finished my PhD from Northwestern and I received a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship at Washington University in St. Louis. And one of the reasons I chose to go there and to work there for 2 years is because I had come across an artist named Damon Davis, who's featured in the show, whose work really moved me. He's from East St. Louis, Illinois, lives in St. Louis, Missouri, is a Black artist and makes work that deals with kind of his subject position as a Black man and Black artist, and also kind of more broad conceptual ideas, things like futurity and humanity. And so when I moved to St. Louis, I got to know this cohort of Black artists making really, really interesting work. Some of it was really, really in conversation with the uprisings in Ferguson, Missouri that started after the murder of Michael Brown in 2014. And some of it kind of was dialogue with that, and some of it was more broadly just engaged with being in the city that used to be the 4th most populous city in the country on the Mississippi River, that was the northernmost slave state, kind of all of these interesting histories, and in the city itself, which is about half Black and half white. And so when I lived in St. Louis, I interviewed about 10 artists with the idea of writing a book about Black artists in St. Louis, because I thought there was this really interesting scene happening in the Mid-South or Midwest that's not really written about. I received the position here at Seattle U, moved to Seattle U, and talked to Molly Mack, who's on this call today, who's amazing. She is the Seattle University Gallery's curator. And I was just telling her about this and going off about, oh, St. Louis is so amazing. And she suggested, well, why don't you curate a show at Hadreen Gallery? So that's how the show came together. And we started working on it about a year ago this time, contacting artists, having conversations with artists, figuring out which works to show, all of that curatorial and kind of administrative process. And up until February, a lot of the work started to be shipped out to the gallery, and then COVID started to hit, and we realized that we needed to shift. And so I give you that opening to think about kind of for each of you, how has the global pandemic changed how you've engaged the art? And Ellen, I want to actually throw over to Ellen now. Ellen has worked amazingly as my curatorial assistant on the show, thinking about programming, education, and marketing. Ellen, is there any kind of other kind of insight you want to add to that opening?
Well, first off, thank you, Jasmine, again, for letting me be part of this. I'm from the Midwest, so that part of the country speaks to me, especially within the arts community. And historically, many admired artists and activists have been born and raised between that junction of Missouri and Illinois. And now into like the 21st century, St. Louis has continued to be such a hub of creative makers and minds, and these 5 artists in Abstractions of Black Citizenship proves that. And these artists in this exhibition defies a lot of tropes that's been created by the art world and the art market, that radical and beautiful and Black art can only gain traction in certain parts of the country. So these artists are just continuing to dismantle these antiquated notions, and I'm just really excited to be part of it.
Something for me as curating the show is that the online space, I think, has opened up where we can engage. I taught last quarter and I Zoomed in a guest speaker from Scotland, a black queer guest speaker from Scotland. I Zoomed in. This quarter I'm teaching the summer and I'm Zooming in folks all across the US. And also online kind of primacies or kind of focuses particularly on the visual and the audio. And so in some ways it kind of focuses on those senses and kind of the other senses fall away in ways that can be fraught. And so kind of this idea of how we might engage online when we realized that we were going to transition from a physical show to some sort of virtual engagement were questions that were circulating. And one of the articles that you read for today, Curatorial Dreaming in the Age of COVID-19 by Erica Lehrer and Shelley Woods Butler, gets at some of the issues we're thinking at, not just the type of senses that might be privileged online, again, the visual and the audio, but also how might we do this work critically with a commitment to ethics and principles like anti-racism. And so working with Molly Mack, kind of, we devise a few different things. And so I encourage you to check out the website. We have education guides that Ellen authored of the Adult Education Guide. Molly Mack edited videos. So we asked all of the artists to record videos of themselves talking in their studio about their art. And those are online on the website. And we've had a series of public programming that will continue. I'm leading a guided tour tomorrow and one next month. And we'll have a few kind of few other events. But kind of the heart of it, the exhibition, we decided to curate online. And so I'm gonna share with you the exhibition and just walk through a moment of it to think about what and how that looks like. Can everyone see this? Okay, so this is the front page of the exhibition. You go through the website and then you can make it full screen. And I actually looked at models like Google Arts and Culture to figure out how to do this. I used Google Slides for this. And so I'm really, really grateful that this exists. But again, one of the kind of quote unquote issues is because it's visual and sonic and not tactile in other senses, and because everything is framed, I'm sitting at my laptop, my 13-inch laptop, scale is off and kind of different online. And so thinking about that, one of my techniques in curating this show was to think about how I might weave. Often when you see visual art, I think it's really important to think about the actual art itself, what you see, the colors, lines, shapes, harmony, balance, things like that. But also, especially with this show, because it was online, I wanted to also privilege the voice of the artist and scholars to help frame the show. So if you've engaged the show online, there's kind of these introductory slides, a little bit about St. Louis, and then I group the show into 7 themes. And so I'm gonna actually go to the last theme today for the show, which is quietness and interiority. And I wanted to think about quiet and interiority as a more fuller way of thinking about Blackness and Black citizenship and the themes of this show. And so I'll read this quote, you all, this is one of your readings today, Kevin Quashie, who's a cultural theorist at Brown University. He writes about quietness for Black people and Black aesthetics. Quiet is antithetical to how we think about Black culture and by extension, Black people. So much of the discourse of racial Blackness imagines Black people as public subjects with identities formed and articulated and resisted in public. Such Blackness is dramatic, symbolic, never for its own vagary, always representative, engaged with how it is imagined publicly. These characterizations are the legacy of racism, and they become the common way we understand and represent Blackness. The idea of quiet, then, can shift attention to what is interior. Indeed, the interior can be understood as the source of human action, that anything we do is shaped by a range of desires and capacities of our inner life. And then I asked to the viewer of this show, how might we center Black people in aesthetics through quietness? What interiors manifest by centering Black quiet in aesthetic practices? And so if you've engaged the show, there's 7 themes, and every theme has 2 to 4 artists. But this last section, I included a work by each of the 5 artists in the show, and I'm going to just quickly walk through those. So first, this is Black Notes by D. Nichols, who is a designer from Mississippi, but has lived in St. Louis for the last 16 years. And she works in a variety of media, but she uses these sticky notes. She uses sticky notes to record kind of reflections on life. And then during the Ferguson uprising, she realizes that she was going to Black colored sticky notes to particularly talk about Blackness. And so here are some of the notes. And just thinking about kind of the words that she writes and how they write and how they orient your senses. And thinking about in this, I made this decision in this slide to have, at least to me, the notes are about the size of them in real life, about 3 by 3 inches. The second work is work by Damon Davis from his series 8/28/08, when he drove 2 hours from St. Louis to Springfield, Illinois for an Obama-Biden rally in 2008. And thinking about in this picture, even though Barack Obama is, one of the most famous people, and Michelle Obama, some of the most famous people in our world, how might we think about quietness in this picture, the way it's framed, the posture of the subjects, the black and white, and what does that quietness animate when thinking about citizenship for Black people and for all people? Third, this is a work by Dominic Chambers, and kind of a fun fact, this work wouldn't have been in the original show. Shipping costs are really expensive for works on canvas, especially from St. Louis to Seattle. But when we switched online, I talked to Dominic and he was super happy to show some of his works on canvas. This work features this raindrop motif, which he calls a raindrop or a veil. He thinks about W. Du Bois' theorization of double consciousness for Black people and the veil that often Black people wear, and thinking about these two identities of being Black American and American. And he particularly thought about the raindrop. He was at home in St. Louis and it was raining, and he connected the veil to the idea of a veil to physical rain. In this work, he uses this dark purple lacquer. And so when you see this work in person, you have somewhat of a translucent, I'm saying the word, translucent reflection in the work, but it's framed by kind of the darkness of the violet lacquer that he uses in this work. Fourth, this is a self-portrait by Katherine Simóne Reynolds, who grew up in the Illinois Metro East part of the St. Louis region and has lived in St. Louis and now lives in Chicago. And you can think about in this kind of photographic image how reflection is centering her body and centering our viewing practices, and how it's making us think about her own interior space and her interiors. And then last, the exhibition closes with a series of works by Jen Everett, who uses and redoubles and glitches and manipulates photographs of Black people for us to think about the home space for Black people and also their home interior life. In this image here, you only see the top image of these flaps of this photo book. We can think about what is withheld and how withholding might have us think about interiority. So I wanted to close with that. And then I wanted to just direct our attention. I know there were 3 readings for today. The last reading, and maybe I'll just go to the final slide. I closed the show with thinking about abstraction. The last reading that you all read for today is Adrienne Edwards, and she's a curator based in New York City. She's actually one of the new curators at the Whitney Museum. And she wrote in 2016 this essay called Blackness and Abstraction, to think about what does it mean that when often people think about Black art, they immediately politicize it. We think that Black people kind of represent this immediate politicization. So she wrote, and I'll just read from the quote in the bottom, in response to the demands placed on Black artists for social content in their art, I put forward Blackness and Abstraction to ask, how do artists negotiate and exhaust the paradigm of representation in visual art? And so I had you do this reading to think about what abstraction might hold or frame for this exhibition and how we think about Black artists in the US.
We were going through the themes that Jasmine was speaking to and how we could make an additional engagement with the patrons that visit the exhibition. The education guides is something that I was working on, and something I really wanted to focus on with mine was having an actual project and allowing adults to actually make something and not just like a typical artist talk or engagement at the gallery. I thought it'd be really interesting to entice adults to make their own work, specifically work around their own spaces and the environment that they were around. So my project was primarily a soundscape, so it invited you to go around your community and take visual notes as well as audio notes as well, and to kind of mash them together into some sort of soundscape or audio project. So yeah, as Jasmine's showing you, that's kind of the example that we were working with educational guides. And yeah, I also wanted to note with these artists, kind of noting what I was saying before about them really dismantling a lot of antiquated notions of like where and how and who can make this work. But most importantly, I think these artists are illustrating that the stories that they want to tell and need to be told instead of such a politicalized, and like how we were kind of reading in the Blackness, that's Blackness and Abstraction, the propaganda that we see a lot within art of certain times or certain parts of the country.
Great. Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of a closing question, but I think maybe thinking about the question we opened up with, thinking about your engagement amidst COVID-19, kind of amidst heightened attention to systemic racism, what does that engagement look like? How can that engagement kind of be sustaining for you? So I kind of offer you that as a question to kind of take with you and think about. Ellen, do you have any closing words to offer?
I wanted to thank everyone for their time and their thoughts and their transparency and vulnerability with us. I know that this is a loaded time. Art is something that I think grounds all of us and we can all learn and benefit from. So I just really appreciate taking the time out of my day to talk to you guys.